What's up? My name is John and this is Cinema Saturday. Today I have a review for Horizon, an American Saga Chapter 1. This movie follows several groups of people as they navigate the United States looking for a home, more than likely in this place called Horizon. There are cowboys and Indians, Native Americans, and some soldiers here as well from the U.S. Army. It takes place in 1859, and we go to several different states, including Montana, Kansas, San Pedro Valley, maybe some others that I'm forgetting at the moment. But we travel through and we just follow the story of these people as they try to navigate life as well back in those times. Things don't always end up as they should, as you would guess. And of course, hijinks ensue. I had a good time with this movie. If I had to describe this movie, I would say it was kind of like watching an episode of Game of Thrones, American Western style. And I saw this in a theater with a crowd of people, and it was pretty cool. It was like we were all sat to watch Game of Thrones, American Game of Thrones Western movie, like 3 episodes back to back in a theater, and we were all heavily invested. I would say right off the bat, this movie is more of a drama than anything else. There's some good dialogue, there's some really heart-wrenching moments, there's some very tense moments that don't really include like action scenes necessarily, but they all work. At least they work for me. I think my audience that I was with, I think those moments also worked for them. I believe they were having a good time. We were all invested. I might have heard some chatter here and there, but it was really about the movie. Nobody was laughing at the movie, when they weren't supposed to. Everybody was really into the story and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. How does this apply to other things? And where do we go from there? So yes, it is a drama more than anything else. There were some action sequences in the movie, but not really that many. I think the biggest action sequence was one at the beginning that you will see. And so after that, any other action was very small. There wasn't too many, scenes like we had in the first, I would say, act of the movie. But there were a couple of, guns and shootouts. I'll probably have several cuts in this video because I probably am just going to start rambling. And there was a lot happening. And this is my first viewing, so I'm trying to remember everything that happened out of this 3-hour-long movie. And so things might be spliced together from here and there. So just bear with me. I'll try to get all of it to make sense at some point, but I appreciate your patience. I think where this movie really shines are some of the moments with tension and you trying to figure out, is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And being on the edge of your seat, waiting for the conclusion or the result of what the scene set up. I do wish that this movie would have taken it a bit further than they did. There's a scene with a woman and a kid, and I was like, in one scene I was like, oh, that kid might not make it out of this scene, or I was like, oh, that woman might have some real trauma after this scene. But it did not really go there. I would think because it's trying to create a certain audience for this movie. I wouldn't say pander, but I think they had a certain audience in mind, and knew if they took the scenes that far, they would lose people, right? Because when I went, the audience, I would say half of them were older people. You know, we pushing 60 plus, which is fine. Everyone can go see this movie. I think this movie is for everyone. It is rated R. So this movie is for a wide range of people, but just keep in mind that the audience they probably had in mind for their box office is definitely a more conservative audience, which is fine. I feel like that's Kevin Costner's bread and butter. You know, a lot of people know him from Yellowstone most recently, and like I was saying in my Weekend Radar, he's had a bunch of other movies. Unfortunately, I haven't checked out necessarily, but you know, he has his fan base for sure. I was a little confused sometimes in the movie. It was hard to figure out when things were taking place. I think it all took place over a like consecutive amount of time. But then there were some moments where I was like, oh, did a couple months go by? Because the movie didn't tell us, but I would guess that a couple months would go by. You know, back in those days, they were traveling by horses, so it's not like we were just driving across the U.S. and could arrive there in a matter of just a couple days, you know. So it was just hard for me to figure out when things were taking place. I just wish the movie would tell me a little bit, you know, if 2 weeks passed, a month passed, if these people were traveling for another week, or if these people were, I just wish it was more clear on when things were happening. I think, again, like it all happened in a consecutive amount of time, but it was really hard to tell. Now, this movie is 3 hours long, and I kind of felt the run time, but only a little bit. Right, there were some moments where I was like, oh, are we getting to the end of Act 2? Are we getting to the end of Act 3? Is this movie coming to a conclusion? I was kind of too invested into the story to really care, but I always like to check my watch just to make sure if I, need to adjust my positioning because we're going to be here another hour, or if I need to mentally prepare myself for the third act main cast bloodbath, which just being a part one. There was not really a third act main cast bloodbath, but there was a action scene at the end of the movie. It's a real character-driven movie because we follow these characters, we get to know them, and we get to see what they want in life or how they navigate life back then in the 1850s, 1860s, 1859. All the acting was fantastic. There was some kinkiness in this movie too. I was not expecting that. Of course, there's romance. There are people involved. Love and relationships is a part of life. So expect a little bit of kinkiness. There was one sex scene that I really didn't know if it was warranted or not. I think once the movie continued after that scene, it kind of showed why this character decided to have sex, but up to that point we were playing it really safe, and I would say the sex is not rated R, but it was enough for maybe a kid to figure out, that's what sex is, so be aware of that. There is a little bit of nudity in the movie. Forgive me. When it happened, I feel like I went by myself, but if I was with my boys, I feel like, or we were watching this at home and the nudity happened, I feel like we were waiting for the titty to slip, bro. We were just waiting. We were watching. We were just like, oh, you gonna get a titty? We gonna get a nipple? Is it gonna? Yeah, nipple! Oh, but then it made you feel awful right after that scene because turns out maybe we, the audience, weren't the only person, the only people watching this person, and then you started maybe feeling a little disgusted. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Something that I was a little worried about going in, that the movie quickly put at ease, was, I guess, the topic of racism. You know, I wasn't sure if there were going to be any black people in this movie or how they were going to be treated, because it is 1859. So I was a little nervous, but nobody here is really inherently racist. I think there's one dude who called the Native Americans Indians, and I was like, oh no, oh no. Trust me, I have experience with being named after an Indian, but that context and that story is way different than what's here. He really meant it in the not nice way. So, but the racism, there wasn't really any. You know, everyone worked together. Everyone's here trying to get a better life and settle at this new place called Horizon. So if you were someone that was worried that maybe they were going to bring up some topics like that would make you uncomfortable, you can be rest assured that no one's racist towards the black people here. Everyone is equal. It is even shown in this movie that there are good Native Americans and then there are bad Native Americans. But that's with all people. There are all, any ethnicity, any group of people, there's always your good ones and your bad ones. But what's the saying? One bad apple ruins the bunch. And this movie lets us know that tenfold, which is kind of sad, to be honest. There's a quote that I like to say from Michael J. Fox's Family Ties, the sitcom from back in the 80s. There's an episode where he was going against a Russian chess player, and you know, we were at the Cold War at that time, and their quote from the show was, "It's easier to hate a country, but it's harder to hate a person from that country." And I really feel that, because these Native Americans, you know, this one dude had decided to go, you know, kill all these people, but the war chief or the Native American chief was like, you shouldn't have done that, because now these people are going to retaliate and they're going to kill all of us because you look like us, and they don't know which one of us is you, so they're probably just going to kill us all. And I thought that was sad, but I also thought that was a very accurate statement. So it was a little heavy. But overall, this movie isn't even that heavy. There's some comedy in this movie. There are some lighthearted moments to balance out the very serious tone of this overall drama. So that was much appreciated. I did like some witty banter. I like the characterizations of some people and what they said. And, you know, it really painted a clear picture of who these people are. I will also say that chapter 1 is definitely a part 1. It feels like a part 1. It feels like we're setting up to know all these people, so that in chapter 2 or chapter 3 or how many other chapters there end up being, that you know who they are, you know their background, and so when shit hits the fan, you know what was at stake. You know what it took for them to get here and how much they're risking to either stay here or what they're fighting for. So I liked it. For that reason. So if you can get through this little bit of setup for everyone, then I think you'll be fine. I think most people will enjoy this movie. And it really did feel like this movie, or maybe even these set of movies, could end up being like some type of mini-series. It really did feel like maybe we're taking a 12-episode mini-series and chopping them up and 3-hour movies, which I think is a cool thing to do. It does make this movie feel like an event. It makes it feel like, oh, you got to go see chapter 1 because chapter 2 is going to come out and you don't want to be behind. They maybe try to give a little bit of that Marvel effect, but it definitely felt like I wanted to go see this movie. I wanted to be a part of the conversation. I think you could find yourself maybe even making small talk with people that have seen this movie and having some in-depth discussions about what happened, what did that mean, where do you think this person went. So I think it's really good for that. I did make a comparison of this movie to Game of Thrones, but it's not as bad as Game of Thrones. I would say it's not as gory as Game of Thrones. It's not as incestuous as Game of Thrones. So if that alarmed you a little bit, you can breathe a little bit because it's not as intense as Game of Thrones, but it does have its moments where things get very serious. Who can you take to this movie? You can take your parents. I think it's okay for you to watch this movie with your parents. It will be fine. That one sex scene is very tamed, so it's like you obviously know what's going on, but it's not so cringy that I felt like, oh gosh, I gotta look away, or oh man, I hope I didn't see oh man, I don't want to see this with my parents because this will make everything very uncomfortable. If you just be mature about it, it'll be fine. It wasn't anything too crazy. I might end up going to see this movie a second time. I have a buddy that wanted to go see this. I wasn't able to see it with them, but it might be worth a second viewing just to really understand everything that happened. You probably don't have to go do a second viewing in the theater unless you really, really, really want to know. But I definitely think you should watch it on at least streaming. If you saw it in the theater the first time, watch it in streaming before Chapter 2 comes out in August. Just to refresh your mind, because like I said, this is a 3-hour movie and a lot happens. Like I almost feel like I should have been taking notes during the movie to keep up with all the characters and their storylines and what's going on. Going back to characters, I did like all of the different types of characters, right? Some of them may have seemed stereotypical, but some of them, even if they were stereotypical, they were different variations of a stereotype, so I did enjoy. They were different variations of those stereotypes. So I did enjoy seeing how people who are all trying to accomplish this one thing, all trying to go to the same place, have different motives for why they're doing it and what are they going to do when they get there. It really didn't tell us too much other than just live and make a better life for themselves. This ain't the gold rush or anything like that. They're just trying to settle across the land, horizon, more than 15,000 acres. So there's enough land there for you to get an acre for you and your family, potentially. I definitely recommend going to see this if you're a little bit interested. I think it's worth it. Keep in mind about the 3-hour runtime, but the pace is good. I never really got bored. Even when I checked my watch, I wasn't bored. I didn't check my watch because I was bored. I checked my watch because I was like, oh, things seem like they're revving up. Is this movie about to end? Oh, no, we still got another hour. All right, let's run it. Let's keep going. So it's good. Oh, there was some amazing, beautiful shots in this movie. There's one fall shot with some yellow leaves, and I was like, wow, cinema. It was so beautiful. I was like, you can put that in a painting in your living room. It looks so great. Like I said, we went to like Montana and the mountains, so there's like mountainous backdrops, and I'm just like, I could live out here. Not in 1859 though. There are no rules. This is not necessarily a lawless land, but the people of the law are so few and far between, so by the time anything really happens, by the time they get there, it's too late. So, don't want to live in this time period necessarily. I wouldn't make it. I wouldn't make it. I'm weak. I'm weak. Yes. Again, splicing things up. I'm just rambling. Because it was a lot, but I do want to make sure that I cover a broad spectrum to, at least prepare people for what they're getting into. So if you can make it out to go see Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1, I highly recommend it. At least for the kind of event-like film of this movie, because we know that we're getting a Chapter 2. Right? So it's like, oh, how does this story continue? Don't we want to see how the story continues? Yeah, you do. By the time this movie ends, there are several loose ends that definitely need tying up. That might get tied up in Chapter 2, or they'll just continue on with the story, and then we'll have some more loose ends to tie up in Chapter 3. I think it's definitely worth going to see. Furthermore, I would say it's worth going to see on the big screen. I think, especially with an audience of people, and you're all there, you're all just soaking up the juices of the Horizon, which is funny because the Horizon is in the West, pretty much in the desert. So there aren't many juices to be soaking up. In fact, there are some issues that even come up with water distribution in this movie. That was my quick review of Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1. Will you go see it in theaters? Are you going to wait for streaming, watch Chapter 1 on streaming, and then maybe catch Chapter 2 in theaters if you like Chapter 1 enough? Thank you for watching Cinema Saturday. Again, my name is John. I hope you go see this movie so we can talk about it with your friends. And as always, have a good one. God bless America. Amen.